We have just two more games left as Arsenal finish their season in not particularly the way that we wanted, but it does mean that focus has already turned to the summer. But there's some interesting news to talk about ahead of Arsenal's next fixture. This is today's Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal News Show. Joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you so much as always for tuning in and very much so joining us. It is greatly appreciated. I hope you had a fantastic week so far. I know it's only Tuesday, but I hope the start of it was good for you. And I hope indeed Monday has been got through well. We've now just got to get through Tuesday, which is always a horrible day. Tuesdays just aren't nice. They're not good. I had a day off yesterday, but I spent most of it painting. Was what I spent my Monday doing. A lot of painting. So it's in some ways it's a relief to get back to the grind. You never think you would say that, but it genuinely is. Good morning to all of you joining us live in the chat box. Thank you so much as always for doing so. Black Shine, Jamil, Tom, we've got Chris, we've got Stevie and Shari, we've got Colin and Steve and Paul, Knowledge, Glenn, Grantley Poos and Carlton and Brian, Julian, Sooty, Di, Steve, Roger, Loga, Huey, Amberly and Martin and Mike. We've got Paul and other Mike, Oliver, Matt G. We've got loads of people joining us. What I like sometimes in the mornings is that obviously sometimes StreamYard deletes all the comments, and it's great to see I can read all these names out. I'm not really doubling up. It's great to see so many different people as always in the chat. If you could drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on, that would indeed be greatly appreciated. But yes, thank you all of you for tuning in. I'm trying to highlight as many of your comments as I can this morning on the screen. I'm doing my best. I'm doing my absolute best as I can. But thank you to you all for tuning in. Let's jump, though, into today's stories. And as I exclusively revealed yesterday on Football.London, Arsenal are due to launch their new kits this week and wear it against Newcastle on Sunday. In what is obviously a exciting bit of news. The launch, of course, as has become tradition really at Arsenal, to release the kit before the end of the season. But I did do some digging around the story yesterday and got it confirmed that it's indeed going to be launched this week. I believe it could be Thursday that we get that release. So just keep your eyes peeled. And it was, I tell you what, I don't, I'm still very early on in this whole journalism sitch. And I find that what's interesting as well sometimes, a lot of effort goes into, I can't imagine the amount of work at the moment that it takes the likes of David Ornstein and Sammy Mokbel and others that break some really big transfer lines because they have amazing contacts and have worked incredibly hard to be able to put out the stuff that they put out. And I tell you what, it must be incredibly frustrating. Like, aggregation is a necessary thing, and we all follow the relevant aggregators when they share stories that obviously come out. But I have started to get the feeling I've empathized with some of the things that I've heard from some of my colleagues as well that have talked about it, that you put all this work into getting information, and you write up your article with your story, you tweet out your article, and it just takes seconds for someone to just type the same tweet as you and tag your Twitter handle, don't even tag the article. And you're like, oh, put loads of effort into that. And someone else is reading it off of another tweet. I can't help it. It's one of those. It's like, let me try and put it into kind of perspective. Imagine if you're like, I don't know how I can put it into another kind of term of if you're a builder and you build an amazing garage conversion or a new, I don't know, something that a builder builds. It's not my field of expertise. And then it's posted kind of elsewhere on a group, look at this amazing new build. And, it's, I don't know, I can't really explain it. It's just a weird feeling of when you do all that work and then it's like, oh yeah, it's out there elsewhere. You're like, oh, no one's reading the article. It's one of those, and it's not like copyright. No, Soup. It's not like that at all. It's not a copyright thing. It's not the same. It's not like video. It's something else. AI art, says Sam. I don't know how AI art would work. You'd have to let me know. But it's one of those. But yes, there's my my frustrating rant this morning about journalism. But yes, Arsenal are due to release their new kit this week. I believe it's going to be on Thursday. And are expected to wear it against Newcastle on the weekend. So you'll be able to get your new kits and wear it for the final home game of the season. So yeah. And by the way, for those that think this is kind of a publicity stunt, if you will, after obviously Arsenal have gone out of the Champions League and the title's over. This is pretty normal for the club these days. We didn't do it last season because Arsenal, of course, could have won the title on the final day and they would have wanted to lift the title had they have won it wearing the shirt that they'd worn for that season. But they'd done it the season before that and the season before that. So I thought it was a good time to go and check up on the story. And indeed, this is the case. So yes, we should get it. And you've probably seen plenty of the leaks by now. There's a lot of leaks online, of course. It's really easy to catch them. But there are, from a few people I've spoken with, to put it in layman's terms, nostalgia, iconography, a return to kind of the pure red and white as well. With last couple of seasons, we've had other colours on the shirt, which obviously we've noticed has come like a running theme, like the blue this season, the gold the season before that. So yeah, it's an interesting kit. I like what I've seen so far, if that indeed turns out to be the accurate representation of what it is. But yeah, it looks good, and looking forward to the kind of pure red and white, if you like, being returned to in this sense as well. Let's move forwards though to the next story, which is, of course, Jurrien Timber and Declan Rice. An update on these two, and an injury update on both of their situations. Declan Rice, of course, reported by Sammy Motbell yesterday that Declan Rice has suffered a hamstring injury. I was told yesterday it was muscular, which obviously that tracks. But I was also given some encouragement that it's hopefully thought not to be too serious. But it is interesting because obviously after the game, and we talked about this on yesterday's show, Arteta was asked after the presser about what was and pointed towards what was believed at the time to his hip, unless indeed he was kind of pointing maybe more towards his hamstring and it was just kind of misinterpreted. I don't know. But I think what Arteta says about injuries sometimes, I think obviously we know these days we have to take with a little bit of a grain of salt. I don't think I don't think that we can trust Arteta too much when it comes to injuries. But yeah, look, I think that for Declan Rice, if indeed he is going to miss any more games this season, Arsenal have got a very good point at Liverpool without him, and hopefully that will be enough, even with that away game to Southampton, the home game to Newcastle next, to get the result that we want. Jurrien Timber, of course, less serious. He was with the squad in Liverpool, but it was deemed there that he wasn't fit enough to play. Hopefully another week's worth of rest would help him to get back for that game against Newcastle on Sunday. So yeah, but obviously a hamstring injury again, frustrating. It's just part of the season, I think, and it's because of the short squad, and we left ourselves in that position, and we obviously need to do more in the summer to tackle that. Speaking of the summer, Andrea Berta could be cooking up a fine summer meal, it seems. There's lots of really positive noise coming out about Arsenal right now in the summer window. There's a lot of encouraging signs. So far, of course, we know that Arsenal have agreed a deal with Martin Zubimendi. We're just waiting on kind of the club side of things, but the player and the club have agreed this move between player and Arsenal, of course, to join the club in the summer. Talks are underway on contracts. Thomas Partey, William Saliba, Gabriel Martinelli. We've heard reports about Leandro Trossard, although I've not heard that myself. We've heard that Bukayo Saka, of course, is not expected to be a problem at all when it comes to a new deal either. I know there were some suggestions before that Saka had actually agreed a new deal. You may have seen going around. As far as I'm aware, that wasn't the case when I saw those reports coming around. Still waiting on some final stuff, or quite a bit of stuff, actually. to happen regarding kind of that Saka contract. But it is something the club are very calm about, and there's a real confidence that Saka, of course, will sign on and will indeed renew. And these, people focus very blinkeredly, if you like, if that's even a word, on transfers. But Andrea Berta's job is not just about transfers; it's also about renewals, contract renewals as well. And he's been very adamant on those fronts. The Zubimendi situation, of course, is kind of a multi-sporting director scenario. We've had Edu, we've had Jason Ato involved in this, we've had the club's execs involved in this, and Andrea Berta kind of picked up the work that had been done regarding Zubimendi to try and get it finished. It will be Andrea Berta that does, of course, finish that deal and gets the rubber stamp, if you like, on that deal. But it is a deal that's been worked on by a number of executives at the club over the last, fair few months and beyond as well. We know that Jurrien Garcia is another player Arsenal really like, but there's been some suggestions, some reports that Andrea Berta would rather the money be allocated elsewhere than a backup goalkeeper that might cost over 20 million quid. And I kind of empathise with that view, to be fair. If Arsenal can find a cheaper option, I would understand exactly why he would want to do that. And I see John in the chat box says, recall Carl Hein, make him the number 2 rather than going way over the top on a backup goalkeeper. So if that report, and I don't know if it is true, I can't tell you or not whether it is. All I know is that Arsenal were very confident and keen on the Spanish keeper, but Andrea Berta's come in and he has definitely changed some things. To my knowledge, he's definitely had an impact on Arsenal's existing plans. Obviously, the Zubimendi situation was not changed, but there are some plans behind the scenes, some thoughts that have, to my knowledge, been tweaked already. Some discussions. I think there's a feeling that Berta will be more of a challenge to Arteta than Edu was. I think there's a feeling, certainly that's the sense I get, is that Andrea Berta is going to be, with his experience, having worked at Atletico Madrid, that where Edu, and maybe one of the reasons behind Edu leaving, of course, was he was frustrated at the lack of influence maybe that he was having, as well as, of course, the monetary benefit of going to where we expect his next job to be. I think that there is something to be said about the fact that his experience, his stature, will mean that he can challenge Arteta maybe more successfully than Edu did. And of course, now we're in a position where we need to sign that centre forward, and that is Arsenal's priority. That is the top of the pile. That's the player, that's the position that they want to get the most and want to invest the most in and do the biggest job. So that's part 1. We're going to go to part 2, tackle some of your questions, some of your thoughts of things we discussed in part 1 and more right after this. All right, this is part 2 of today's show where we jump into the chat box and tackle some of your thoughts. I think we should probably scroll up a little bit, shouldn't we? Sooty says, re-aggregators, I couldn't agree with you more, Tom. I think it's important not to paint everybody the same brush. Some people do an excellent job in kind of, keeping people up to date, crediting people correctly, linking to their articles, retweeting the original piece. For instance, I know that Doc, of course, who celebrated David Ornstein following him the other day, I noticed, for instance, is a pretty good example of, the aggregation that does exist, retweeting. When they do post stories, they'll tag and leave a link to the article. There are people out there that genuinely do good work, I think, in aggregation. And said, obviously, there is something to be talked about regarding so many that just don't, and just copy and paste what's been written, and then just if you're lucky, leave a tag. And I just think there are people that do way more work than me that get quite mugged off with kind of, a lot of work. Because at the end of the day, a lot of work goes into writing the pieces, writing the articles. Our employment is based around people reading those pieces. And so obviously you put that work in and put pieces out, and it just kind of gets torn away. So there are ways to do it, and I think there are ways to not do it. And I think I experienced that a lot yesterday. Anthony, so you think it's bad timing? I don't think it's a case of bad timing. I think it's always was going to be this way, where Arsenal's kit was going to release at this point. It's just kind of ironic, but Arsenal have, it's become a bit of a tradition really at the club to do so. It didn't happen last season because of the title scenario, but it's been somewhat of a tradition as well. Let's go to Amaral Guinness. Says, Tom, the priority is winning trophies, not bringing someone in to challenge a manager. I don't really know what the comment means, mate, to be fair. Because obviously I think that goes without saying, doesn't it? I'm not really sure what the angle is there. Varron says, score prediction for a match between our current team and the Invincibles. If everyone's fit, I think the Invincibles would take it, but I don't think it would be like a wild gap between them. I think the interesting tactics, they'd be pretty good at stifling that team. The 4-4-2s these days is not a system that's often used, and it can leave quite big gaps. It's a different era of football. I think football's obviously evolved a hell of a lot, and that's why people say, if you put a team with like the Man City team played that Arsenal team, football's different. Football was played in a different way back then. It's hard to make those comparisons. So either team could get beaten comfortably, but we would probably only know about that because of the way football has changed over the last 20 plus years. Sam says, did you catch the Bellerin chat talking about Lineker and Alistair Campbell, among other things, about the environmental impact of wastes of new kits? It's worth listening to. I haven't yet, Sam, and I will check that out. Thank you for the heads up. Harry says, I think Arteta's system revolves around having very big players on the pitch and very physical players. Can Gyökeres be that physical force? I haven't been able to. Yeah, certainly. He's definitely got physicality to his game. He definitely can be a presence in the box, hold the ball up, be an aerial threat. So, his heading's not amazing, but he definitely can be an aerial presence. But it is an area of his game that's perhaps more of a weakness, his heading ability. But he's still certainly something of a target man and can, you just look at his number of assists he's pulled up for Sporting. He brings others into play. That goes without saying. And she says, Tom, there are Portuguese outlets talking about offering more than 8 million for Gyökeres. We know there is an interest, and from Ormstein's video, we seem to be moving quickly. Have you heard anything in that regard? I think that if you have a look at what's that? 8 million a year. 8 million divided by 52. So £150,000 per week, well, euros per week. That's pretty standard, to be fair. It's pretty good if Arsenal get their new brand new striker on less than 200 grand a week. I think they've done pretty well. But Arsenal will be looking to move quickly for their deals this summer. They don't want things to roll on. There's no guarantees that can happen, but Arsenal will want to be aggressive in this market, that's for sure. Paul says, was it better to get knocked out of the Champions League in the semi-final rather than losing in the final? No. No, Paul. I would have rather have got to the final. If we would have lost in the final, sure. But you could arguably point that out between is it better losing in the semi-final or getting knocked out in the league phase? They're the same result. Other than financial means, they're the same result. So no, I'd rather. I think it's something about progressing far in these cups. We can't. I think I'm not saying this is you, but there's an entitlement about trophies. There's a binary look at trophies of you either win it or you don't, and one's success, one's failure. And I don't think, and Arteta said it to me, in an answer. I asked him about Man United's run of winning trophies and getting to finals, and he said, I don't really talk about football in terms of success and failure because I think he's talking there about the spectrum of what is progress and, are you on the right track? And people will say, people measure success just in that form of trophies, but I don't think that's not certainly the way I look at it necessarily, but some people do. And that's just a different way that people view the sport. And that's fine to have different opinions on that. I think Arsenal, if you measure it just purely on that, if you measure it purely on if you measure it purely on just trophies, you would ignore everything else. Then I think you'd end up making a lot of bad decisions when it came to kind of not just players, but managers and things like that, because you have to look at the broader context of how likely you are now as a club to win a trophy. Have you positioned yourself more as effectively enough to win trophies in the coming years? And I think Arsenal definitely are. If you consider the teams in the world right now, Arsenal, you do consider, despite the fact they've not lifted those trophies in the last 5 seasons, they are still one of those teams that you would look at and say they are one of the most likely candidates to lift the trophy next season, without a doubt. Johnny says, you found your own analogy. Berta swooped in and getting credit for Zubimendi. Aggregators retweeting stories. I don't necessarily think that's the same because Berta's had to do work, you know. There's been work on that deal. He's going to have to close that deal. He's going to have to get the final details on structure of payments. He's going to have the final details on the structure with Real Sociedad. So I don't think it's quite the same. I don't think it's quite the same at all, actually. I think it's completely wrong, Johnny. But it's a good attempt, though. Harish says, if we don't get an agreement on Partey's extension, do you think we could look at a Gume? I personally would like a Buadi. He can be signed before the age of 18, or pull Rice back into the 6. I think Rice's role is an 8. I think that's his best role. I think that's where his future lies. I think that's what we're going to get the best from Rice now. I've really gone full circle on this. So I think Partey's contract, obviously, talks are underway. I think Arsenal, as David Ornstein spoke about yesterday when he was speaking on television, that he will expect to, I think, he's going to expect to look into this and be very much Arsenal are going to be looking to try and do these deals. If Arsenal don't renew Partey, they'll be looking to do a deal for a midfielder. I think that's pretty much expected at this stage. So let's go to I'm trying to find some questions here. Amaragana says, if it's only about trophies, then the Invincibles doesn't mean anything. Well, they won a trophy. But the manner in which they won it, obviously, is important to talk about. Lai says, the measure using trophies falls apart when you look at Man United in the last 3 years. If they win the Europa, then you'll have to say they've been wildly successful, 3 cups in a row. But is that the case? Man United have not been a successful team in terms of kind of, look at them in the league. It's anomalous. It's freak is what it is them getting those trophies. To me, it's utterly a freak scenario, getting to those finals. I think maybe should probably look at the runs that they've had, probably look at the teams that they faced, and that might give us a little bit of an indication about how they've managed to do that. But at the same time, they've won them. So still pick them up. Still, if anything, it's impressive how bad they are, and yet they've lifted them. That's what's impressive. It's not actually the trophy itself. What's impressive is that how they have managed to lift those trophies despite being so bad. That's the irony of it all. Kyle, I've not heard anything to suggest Arsenal are interested in Andre Santos. I've not heard anything on that. Doesn't mean it's not true. I'm just telling you what I've heard. I've heard nothing. Jay says, how long do you think it is until we see Ethan starting consistently? I don't know. I mean, he's made a lot of appearances this season, more than 30 appearances in the Arsenal team. There's a lot of people, I think, concerned about the lack of minutes recently for Ethan. I'm not. He's 18 years of age. He's made well over 30 appearances. We just talked about there. He's played a lot of football for an 17, 18-year-old player. So I'm not concerned about the lack of minutes toward the end of the season. I imagine there's a load management situation going on as well. Jabu says, I think we lack attacking talent. Why do you think that we always want one in, one out and don't stack players like other teams like Liverpool, City and Chelsea? I don't think it's a case of like one in, one out at all, because Arsenal added Kai Havertz in a season where they already had Eddie Nketiah and Gabriel Jesus to the squad. We're signing Zubimendi, and the intention is to keep Thomas Partey despite also having Rice. I know Jurrien is moving on, but that was only because of the end of his contract, and Arsenal wanted to keep hold of Partey, it seems, and have Zubimendi coming through. So, and you've also only got a 25-man squad. It's worth pointing out, but you've only got a limit on the number of players that you can have in your team. And yes, we are short, but I think the shortness is more in the attacking area. And so this summer, you're looking at Arsenal potentially adding a centre forward, yes, but also when you talk about Chelsea and you talk about City and Liverpool, if we have a look at those squads, City and Liverpool in particular, less so Chelsea, because what Chelsea have spent is ridiculous, but more so Liverpool and City, their main bulk of players is not 25 players, is it? It's not 25. And they lost City, Julian Alvarez, in the last summer window, and they didn't replace him. They didn't replace him until it got to January, when they then signed Omar Marmoush. So I'm not sure necessarily that those examples work, because I think typically with the squad size that teams have, you do tend to see a one in, one out. But Arsenal are a little bit shorter now. I think we need to be aggressive in the market at adding more players. We've also got players coming through the ranks as well, which we've seen this season, like Waneri and Lewis Skelly. So that's added numbers to the team as well. Della the Great says, why can't the same be said for Miles Lewis Skelly regarding load management? Because players are different. Every player is different. Every player responds to minutes differently at that age. It might be that MLS has coped better than what Ethan has coped with minutes. So, and you have to remember that MLS suffered a hamstring Ethan Waneri suffered a hamstring injury in January. He came into the squad, he played quite a bit, and then got not serious, but a significant hamstring injury that kept him out for a number of weeks. So I think that's worth pointing out as well in that kind of comparison between the two. Fair point. I appreciate it. Ian says, in 20 to 25 years later, no one will remember how they won it or what was their status in the league. They will simply add, I mean, you say that, but is that really the case? Because I don't think anyone really talks about Arsenal's FA Cup wins, Ian. I don't think anyone really talks about those trophies that Wenger won. It means a lot to me. I mean, the first trophy I saw in 2013-14 as kind of an adult it meant a lot to me. The one the following season, the FA Cup after that, people still wanted still wanted Arsene Wenger sacked. I wanted Arsene Wenger to go. I thought it was a good time for him to leave. So people talk about that kind of thing about in 20, 25 years, we'll still talk about those trophies. We won't talk about how bad. I think that will be spoken about. I think it will be spoken about the league season where United and Spurs finished as the only teams that weren't relegated as low down the table as possible. I think there's more chance of the season that they have had, Man United finishing 17th. I think there's more chance that will be remembered, that season where United finished 17th, than it is that they won the Europa League. Because a lot of people have already forgotten about the Europa League they won with Jose Mourinho. Not many people really talk about that as a kind of an achievement, if you will. In fact, Jose Mourinho talks about how he finished second as one of his biggest achievements in the sport with Manchester United. So I think there's a flawed argument here about the whole in 20, 30 years, all you remember is the trophies. That's not true. It's not true at all. Now, we need to pick them up. There's no doubt about that. That's not what I'm saying. Arsenal have to go out and they have to win one next season. They really, really do. This team is too good to not have trophies attached to it. This manager's too good not to have trophies attached to him. And thankfully, we have one already. But this whole argument about 20 to 25 years, I don't think it stacks up because I don't think it's spoken about. I remember the Europa League final defeat to Chelsea in my mind more than I do others, but for different reasons, So I don't think that argument always works. I think it's a bit of a flawed one. Carl says, if we don't re-sign Partey and sign Zubimendi as the primary DM, but do you think we lack a physical DM? Would we bring in someone this summer? What about Andre Santos? Again, I've not heard anything about Andre Santos. Zubimendi can hold his own. He did in a European final against plenty of Premier League players. So it may not be as physical as Partey, but we've got plenty of physical players in this team. And I think actually we do need someone to really pull those strings a little bit more effectively. Partey's progression is something that really solidified his place in the Arsenal team, but it has been something that has declined in the last two seasons. That part of Partey's game has gone backwards to a degree. So I think that's why they want Zubimendi. Ian says, but they are FA Cups. They are added to our trophy list. Absolutely, yes, they are important, and they are important. But that does not mean a manager does not get sacked. Clubs winning matters most. I think yes, winning matters most, but you have to be in a position where you can do it. If you think that winning matters most, I agree with you. But I think Arsenal are putting themselves in a position where there's more likely. I think the chances of Man United winning as many trophies as they did in the last few years has not been about the manager. I think it's been about a hell of a lot of luck. And I think Arsenal have not had that same amount of luck. So that's why I think you've got to avoid looking at football in such a binary way, because if you do that, you lose all context And it's incredibly lucky. I don't think anyone on this planet believes that Spurs or Man United deserve to be lifting potentially a trophy this season based upon what they've done, and yet they will. No one in their right mind would swap squads, swap scenarios with either of those two teams. Really, realistically, you really shouldn't be in a position where you're thinking, I'd love to swap places with them. I'd love to be the 17th best team in the league and picking up a Europa League trophy. I'd love to have their squad over our squad. I'd love to have their manager over our manager. Really, no one in their right mind's thinking about that. No one really wants that. So it doesn't work for me. Squeezy Cakes, I still don't understand how Chelsea are permitting to keep trading. Well, they keep finding loopholes, don't they? Hotels, selling women's teams. They keep finding ways to do it. That's not on Chelsea. That's on the authorities that have, unfortunately, these. And it's also on Premier League clubs. Premier League clubs had the chance to vote against it, and not enough did. So associated party transactions, APTs, clubs had the chance to put blocks in place and didn't, unfortunately. So he says, Ornstein said that we'd be looking at a left back and Kieran, because of Kieran Tierney and Zinchenko potentially going. Who would you like us to bring in? Yoel Hato as well. He's always been a player that I know Arsenal have had a very big, keen eye on for quite some time. So he is somebody that I like a lot. Versatile, can play left centre half, can play left back. I think it would be good to bring in somebody that means that Calafiori can become more of a central defensive option for us to rotate potentially more so with Gabriel. Because I think Miles Lewis Skelly looks destined to be that player. Left back, so I think Calafiori needs more exposure at left centre half. I think that will be a better role for him in the long term. So there's options for Arsenal. We don't really have any latest on Man City, Matt. There's an expectation that this year we will get more information, but it still might go on a little while. And you can be sure that whatever the result, let's say it goes one way, there could be appeals. It could go on even longer. So, yeah. Spearman says, what was the plan with Calafiori? I think the plan with Calafiori was that he would be Arsenal's left back this season. I really think they saw him as the left back, but I don't think anyone predicted how good, not just how bad the injuries for Ricardo Calafiori would be, but how good Miles Lewis Skelly was going to be. So I think it's fairly obvious that those two unpredictable scenarios has contributed to where we are now. We talked about those comments made on the Italian football podcast the other day. I don't think necessarily told the whole story about Calafiori. I think there's a real angst in Italy about Calafiori leaving Italy for England and for Arsenal and then not getting minutes in the same way that he should be. He's a great player. And I think he's a good signing. But he's just not been able to get the minutes that we've needed to. He didn't miss any matches last season, I don't think, at all. Maybe one or two. There was no indication that from last season that was going to happen. So, yeah, I think Calafiori will prove to be worth it in the long term. Claire says litigation will ensure the City case rumbles on for at least another 2 or 3 years. Nike says, where will Havertz play after we sign a striker? In lots of places. I think Havertz will be a really valuable part of the squad. Someone who can come off the bench, someone who can start, someone who can play in attacking midfield, can play instead of Odegaard, can play with a centre forward, can play left 8. I think Havertz's presence in the team is going to be really important next season after we've added and strengthened even more. Help us go further in cup competitions, of course, as well. So, yeah, I think Havertz will still have a really important part to play in this team. Nudandinho says, can you see Morgan Rogers a realistic option? I don't think so, because I don't think he would want to come to Arsenal and necessarily sit on the bench. He's more of an attacking midfielder, and he might fit the left 8 spot, but that's Rice's role, and I don't see him. I think a lot of people would like him to oust Odegaard, but I can't see that happening at Arsenal. Arthur says, against Newcastle, I'd prefer Calafiori and White in the team because of their height and physical presence. Carl says, when Gabriel Jesus returns in October, I think it's more likely to be later than that, November, December, maybe. What do you think his role will be? Again, I think he could be sold in January, but he could end up getting some important minutes. We might have some injuries by then, who knows? So we might be able to get some chances. We'll have to wait and see. Carl says, the amount of injuries we have had this season is a major cause of concern heading into the next season, of course. But Arsenal need to make sure they're not in a position where they're short. Arteta should not be saying at the start of next season, we were short. There's no excuses for him to say that. If he says that, If he says at any point we are short, like at the start, I'm talking not about like if we have significant injuries again, then he's fair enough. But he can't go into the start of the season saying we're short. That just cannot happen. Cannot happen. Categorically not. Rothaveris says, Tom, I reckon the feeling is like doing your homework at school and everyone copies the answers before class. Halftime Hook says, Steve Stone, in response to what was said earlier, I've heard the reason he isn't playing is punishment for missing or being late to training before the Madrid game, which makes sense because of his minute. I mean, I've heard nothing of the sort. I don't know where that's come from. That sounds, I mean, I don't know where on earth that would come from. Let me just have a quick search to see if I can find it. But there's no, I'm not seeing anything. Not seeing anything at all. I'm trying to find it now. No, I've seen one person tweet it saying they heard a rumor, but I don't know where it's coming from. I know where. Please let me know where you've heard that rumor or where that's come from, because I've heard nothing, and it's quite damaging as well. Imagine if that's not true. Imagine if it's not true, for instance, and there's a good chance it's not, right? I'm not saying it's impossible. You know, we've heard things about Lewis Skelly being late sometimes. I mean, the players themselves have done videos on that and said it that Lewis Skelly is the most likely player to be late. So that makes that one more believable. But on Waneri, where's that coming from? It's so damaging to players' reputation to spread rumours that especially aren't true. I mean, just leaving it in a chat box so it comes up on the show without any source, any link to where that's come from. Incredibly damaging. So it's really important to be so careful about these things. Della says, Tom, Rodrigo or Nico Williams, in your opinion, is the former realistic? I think Williams because of the price. Rodrigo, I think, is just going to be far too expensive. And Williams, obviously, I think, is much more accessible than Rodrigo would be. Dr. Funky Punk says it's concerning that players like Rice, who are very injury resistant, can get injured. We need to improve the well-being of our squad. I mean, he's played pretty much every single game. He had a broken toe earlier in the season and suffered through that for quite a bit. It's not surprising that having been as short as we are, that we're getting these situations emerge and pop up. Jerome says, what's this news about new rules retroactively affecting Arsenal's loans? I mean, the rules of the Premier League in terms of loaning players, I haven't heard anything about them changing. But the Premier League rules state that you cannot loan in more than 2 players at the same time from Premier League clubs. So that's why Arsenal couldn't bring anybody in from, say, another Premier League team because they had Neto and Sterling. I've heard nothing to suggest that of a retroactive thing affecting Arsenal's loans. So, yeah, but we've known that, and I've not heard anything about those loan rules changing. Doesn't mean they won't, but I've heard nothing at the moment. I'm curious why Halftime Hooks, who's been saying that about Nwaneri's now gone quiet. Maybe that's 10. Oh, here we go. If it's not true, it is damaging. But if it is true, then it's equally as damaging. But where is it from? You've not given us any information. So tell us where you've heard it from before leaving it in a YouTube comment section where people read it. Because the more people that post it, the more people say these things. If you hear a rumor and you've not gone to the effort of checking where that rumor came from before leaving it elsewhere I mean, there's over 1,000 people tuning in right now on YouTube. Thank you, by the way, everybody that's listening. Misinformation's so bad. So before posting something or saying, I heard a rumor, maybe double check whether or not it's true. That's the difference between aggregation, for instance, and just retweeting or posting things or whatever. And then we talk about things, because if we talk about, like, if you ask me a question on a story, I will tell you whether or not I think if I've heard anything, my view on it, if I have heard anything about it, or if I've heard nothing, or if I think it's BS, but please ask the question from a place as people have done. I think there was a question earlier on that was like, did you see what David Ornstein said about this? Or did you see what X person said about this? Or did you see what X person said about this? Or we might put it in part 1 where we're saying X person is reporting this. This is what we think about it. This is what we know. But throwing in rumors it's not helpful. It's without any kind of information attached to it or where it's come from. I feel like you probably feel like I'm gunning for you here. It's more of a broad thing. It's more to kind of tackle this as is now. Look at this. This is awful. Spearmint says, I heard that Declan Rice pours the milk in before his cereal. This is really damaging. It's really damaging for people. Matt G says, Tom, I heard a rumor that you drop kicked Rice. Why is it all Rice? What's going on? And by the way, you absolutely missed the Rice Krispies joke there. So I'm actually quite frustrated with you, Spearmint. You missed the Rice Krispies joke, and it was there for the taking, and you missed it. Matt says, I heard a rumor that you drop kick Rice, and that's why he's injured. Is this true? Matthew says, I heard all about it on Tom's show. It's all my fault, 100%. And that says, next season, will Arsenal give some game time to Max Dowman? I think so, yeah. That's certainly the vibe that we're getting. That's certainly what Arteta seems to be hinting towards himself. So, yeah, definitely. Orange Juice says, what is the purpose of conference embargoes and why does it all come out at once? So I've been asked this before, I think. So it's to do with papers mainly. It's to do with helping journalists as well kind of get things out in a fair way at times. So for the paper side of things, there are embargoes because the morning papers have to get their pieces written up from their questions, and then they have to get printed for print, So that's why embargoes exist in that sense. But also, if I did a mix zone, for instance, and I spoke to a player, and there were some questions asked by people in the mix zone to one of the players, if we were just able to tweet that out immediately, someone who asked the question has not had the time to write up their piece and with the answer. And, you want to be able to put it out. Usually on stories and embargoes, what I tend to do is and this is obviously I don't do the mix zones anymore because now I'm in the press conferences. But if, let's for instance say me and Simon were in a mix zone and Simon asked a question and got a good answer from one of the players, we set an embargo of 12 o'clock midday the next day. We decided on that and put it out. Usually, if I'm using quotes that Simon used or Simon asked the question, I'd probably put the tweet out like a minute or two after the embargo, just because I think, that Simon asked the question, so he should be able to tweet out the piece. But obviously, it's fair game. Like you're in a mix zone together. It's fair. I don't have to do that. But it's kind of just one of those things. It's all part of this chaotic journalistic world that I'm still very much learning. So yeah, it's a crazy place. Being in it, you kind of learn, the rules, not the rules, but kind of the unwritten rules, the courtesies, how things are and how things aren't. It's just one of those. Yeah, there you go. Heartoak says, is that not what we do on YouTube? We talk about rumors, lol. Yeah, I don't mind talking about rumors, but tell me where the source is. Tell me where you heard it from. Like, sure, because then if that was the case, we could just say anything, as the chat box has demonstrated about drop kicking Declan Rice, and that's why he's injured. Like if we just say anything without a source, without saying where you heard it from, that matters. So if you're gonna like put it in, tell me where it's come from. That's all we're asking. That's all we're asking is if you're gonna put a rumor in a chat, no problem. But tell me where you heard it from. Tell me what the source of it is. Halftime Hope says just because there is a source doesn't increase the validity. Whoa. The naivety is real. The ignorance is real. If it carries on, it's just not the place. This just isn't the place where we do that. So maybe you should take that. Anas says, Tom, is it true that Real Madrid are going for Saliba next window, but he wants to stay and win trophies here? And what's gone wrong in the semi-final? Real Madrid are obviously very keen on Saliba. This goes without saying. It's obvious. We've seen it. I've heard it. You've seen it reported elsewhere. It's very common knowledge. On the idea of kind of on this idea that Arsenal would sell him, the only way that Arsenal would sell Saliba is by a ridiculous amount of money coming in. They are in control of the scenario. He has 2 years left on his contract. As David has reported, they have initiated contract talks with him. My understanding is the club are very calm and confident on that front, calm about the futures of those players beyond just Saliba. And so, it's true that Real Madrid are very keen, and I'm sure that they will be having discussions. There will be suggestions. I don't know about an official offer. If they get encouragement from the players' side, that's when you tend to kind of go for the offer. You tend to speak unofficially, if you like. I always point people in the direction of James McNicholas's video, Gunner blog, where he talks about kind of how transfers work. Let me see if I can leave a link to it. How football transfers are actually done is the video that James uploaded onto his Gunner blog channel. I recommend you go and watch it. It's a very, very good video, and it gives you kind of an insight into how transfers work and the unofficial things that go on. And give it a watch. It's a really good one, and that should give you a bit of an insight into this. So there you go. Gary says, I heard a rumor that United are signing Roy Cropper for the midfield, and Dev Vahindra can help them shut up shop. The Real Fortitude says, how do we know that you haven't just made up to get attention? Here's the thing. Like, when it comes to like genuine rumors, like, and from a perspective where I'm in, like, and I say this with all due respect, and this is going to come across, there's no way of me saying this without it coming across a little bit big boot. But there's a difference between a faceless account in a chat box saying something, right, whose real name's not on their profile, that's got a picture of whatever as their avatar. And whenever we talk about things that we've heard in and around like the club, it's because it's coming from the perspective of it being our job. Like, I'm trying to explain this as easy as possible. So, for instance, let me give you an example. The Waneri loan management stuff that we've discussed here is this idea that's come from discussions around the fact that Waneri has suffered with injuries earlier on in the season, that as an 18-year-old, we talk about players being exposed to minutes a hell of a lot quite quickly. Mikel Arteta himself has been spoken about Waneri at length and also mentioned kind of the amount of minutes that he's playing. So this is just a simple case of putting several points of evidence together as we discuss potential theories as to why a player might miss games. And that's where load management comes from. A rumor that somebody is late to training that has absolutely zero evidence behind it and just putting it out there is in by no means okay, or anywhere near to the idea of theorizing after injuries have been suffered and after Arteta has himself talked about the amount of minutes a player has got and being in and around things that go on, that talking about load management as a potential reason as to why Waneri may not be getting exposed to as many minutes at the end of this season is completely night and day. Could not be more chalk and cheese if you tried. So, and the funny thing is, right, about this whole discussion is at no point has the person who has talked about this rumor about Waneri being late to training, which again, I want to stress with all respect, has absolutely no base to it, because the person who's putting in the chat box has not said once where they heard it from. Not said once where it has come from. And for that reason, I don't, and after several times of asking, it's not provided. And I think it's dangerous to spread misinformation in that sense when you're saying things like, I've heard this, I've heard that, with absolutely no basis behind it or any offer of where you've heard it from. It's dangerous. Very, very dangerous indeed. Fuad says, Tom, I'm a massive fan of Eze. I think he would be amazing for us, especially going up against low block teams. I hope we invest in the attacking midfield area, not to mention he can play in the wide areas as well. I could wax lyrical about Eze all the time. I've gone over this time and time and time and time again. Eze would be great. I know not everyone agrees with me. I know some good friends of mine don't agree with me, but I would love to see Eze at Arsenal next season. I think it'd be a great addition to the squad. I really, really do. Paul says, Hand of Ozil and Fabrizio Romano, trusted sources because of their track record, but no history, not a trusted source. I think there are obviously some accounts that, for instance, Hand of Ozil doesn't have a name or a picture attached to their account, but when you have a look at the track record of things that they get right, it's quite obvious there are sources, quite obvious they've spoken to certain people. It's quite obvious that they get good information that is proven right. Yes, not always. And, there are experiences of, things that are posted that turn out not necessarily to be accurate. But that, again, it's about track records. It's about the level of hits as opposed to the very few losses. And when you suffer those losses, and they can happen, let me give you an example of this story about the kit. As of my information yesterday, when I reported the story, and I don't expect this to change, by the way, I'll be very surprised if it does. And I've reported it because I've got it double sourced and I've checked with the right people and then reported it that the kit launch is going to happen later this week, as I've mentioned on this show, I think Thursday, and that they're expected to wear the kit at the weekend. Can you imagine if they made a decision later in the week to now change that? Can you imagine how that would make me look, for example? Can you imagine? And that happens with people. There's been things that have happened where people have heard something that's been good information at the time, and then it's changed, and something's changed. Maybe it's a transfer. Fabrizio Romano has done Here We Go on players. I think João Pedro to Newcastle is one that stands out. Now Fab has got, he's probably the most famous transfer journalist in the world. And yet I remember that one transfer, Here We Go, that was wrong because things change. Things can change at the last hour in this sport. What you hear at the good time, if you get it double source, triple source, you check with the right people, you hear the right line, you put the story out there. At that point where you've published it, that is what you've heard. That's what you understand. That is what you expect to happen. And being still very early on in this process, when I reported that story, I said later this week. Now I've heard it's Thursday. That I've reported later this week because even in this early youth stage of this career, there's still part of me that is so conscious, I think, about the idea that could potentially change that I stop short of it. Now I may end up regretting not actually putting the day out, and that's in a way maybe why I'm saying it here as well. Because if something was to change, you'd look so silly, and that's why I don't enjoy necessarily the transfer reporting as much, because transfers are so volatile, such a volatile thing to report about. It's so, and it's the most thankless task. Like if you click under like any of Fab or David's tweets, it's just people. It's not people going brilliant work or like great. There might be some, to be fair, but the majority of the time, it's not people going great work, amazing effort, fantastic chase of that story. It's just, what about this player? What about this player? What about Chelsea? What about Man United? Tell us about this. Tell us about that. It's a really thankless task, is what it is. And that's why it's not necessarily the most enjoyable thing in the world to be reported on. But it can be really rewarding, obviously, when you. And it felt great to be able to break that news about us wearing the kit on the weekend. They better bloody do it now. Front Yard says, Tom, have you seen people using Lenny Yoro's stats to say he's better than Saliba? Stats are, I love them. I love the data. It gives you a good idea. But at the end of the day, you can use stats in any way, really, to prove a point, can't you? So I think they're a good inference. They're a good idea, and give us a good example of a good feel for it. But as we talked about in a previous show, the analytics in the game beyond what we know, it's night and day. It's night and day. What we can understand, what you can watch a YouTube video, You know, with all due respect to those that upload analytical videos, like it's always going to be restricted and limited to our own knowledge, our own understanding. But what actually clubs and players work with is so far more in depth. It's absolutely crazy to think about the difference between the two. Let's go to 88 miles per hour says we need another black and gold kit. Oh, I'd love that. I would love that. I'd love to see another black and gold kit. That kit is my favorite kit of all time. And it's a more recent one. You think, you go nostalgia, go back to the kits of the past. But that black and gold kit was always the best. Always was, without a doubt. Let's do a couple more. We've got time. I got time to do a couple more. Prodo Loane says, heard Madrid are going for Huzen. It might be because Saliba is extending. I mean, they'll definitely be across that. I'm sure they'll be across that, yeah, because, they want a defender. We've heard this. It's very well reported. Saliba, we know, is a primary target, but if they can't get him as a Spanish international now, Dean Huzen makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think we've seen those reports as well. Real Madrid. Dean Huzen. Yeah, I mean, you just click on that. Immediately, loads of things come up. Immediately, a lot of reports are coming up covering that story. So, yeah. And as says, Tom, according to you, which player should Arsenal sign for the striker role? And love the Rudegaard, Mike. Doesn't get enough love, this. Ingenuity. But in terms of the centre forwards, I'm 50-50 on Sesko and Gyökeres. I really am. I'm 50-50 between the two. Sooty says, Tom, are we signing the mystery German this summer? Maybe the mystery German signing this summer. That'd be great, wouldn't it? That'd be great. The mystery German signing of the last summer. That I mean, come on, man. That story was so funny. And you talk about like hedging your bets, like an entire nationality is pretty broad. I know there's a pressure sometimes, especially when people set up like, well, there's people are paying for this, at the end of the day. People are paying to get information. And there's a pressure on you to get that information out there because you're paying for it and you expect it. But wow. Wow. Anyway, thank you so much as always for tuning in. Really appreciate your time. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic day. We've gone in depth today. We had a pretty big glimpse behind the curtain about some stuff. We've been pretty hard on the rumor stuff. Just be careful out there, people. If you see rumors and there's no source attached to them, be careful. You don't need to it's probably worth only really coming and being like, what do you think about this? I've heard this rumor about this. But if you heard that rumor from John down the road on his Twitter account, sorry, John, or anyone called John, it's probably not worth paying much attention to unless it's got some weight behind it or is put across by an account with some like clout with it or any kind of reputation. It's probably not worth bringing up. And then after you've brought it up and then are challenged on it, it's probably not worth getting a bit stubborn about it and then refusing to see where you heard it from, and instead of going, yeah, you know what, I just heard it from some random guy, I probably shouldn't have shared it. So, it is what it is. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful, have a fantastic day, enjoy yourselves, and as always, up the Arsenal.